Imagine waking up to find the world you knew has been erased. Entire cities turned to ash, millions forced to leave their homes as borders and governments collapse under the weight of total war. The path to this destruction began in 1919. Following its defeat in the First World War, Germany was saddled with severe economic penalties. By 1923, the currency had collapsed so completely that a single banknote represented 1 trillion marks, a mathematical absurdity that made life savings worthless. This wasn't a crisis of abstract numbers, it was a crisis of daily survival. For millions of Germans, the worthlessness of their money meant tangible poverty and a loss of national dignity. This economic ruin created a desperate political vacuum. In the midst of the chaos, a charismatic figure emerged who promised to replace humiliation with power and poverty with jobs. By early 1933, Hitler had secured the chancellorship and moved to dismantle any remaining internal resistance. As rival political parties were dissolved and dissent was silenced, the state focused its newfound authority on a massive, covert rearmament of the military. In September 1939, this machine was unleashed on Poland. It introduced a new military doctrine, blitzkrieg. This lightning war relied on the seamless coordination of tanks, aircraft, and radio communications to strike with overwhelming speed. The effectiveness of the new strategy shocked the world. Traditional defenses were bypassed or overwhelmed entirely, causing one of Europe's strongest military powers, France, to fall in only a matter of weeks. The conflict had evolved. What began as local aggression had transformed into a highly synchronized, mechanized force moving at a global scale. By the summer of 1940, only Britain remained as a major Western European power refusing to surrender to the Axis. With the ground invasion stalled by the English Channel, the battlefield shifted to the skies. German bombers targeted British cities day and night in an attempt to force a surrender from the air. Civilians were forced to live and sleep on the platforms of underground stations as buildings disappeared above them. Yet, despite the constant bombardment, the British resolve held, marking Germany's first major strategic failure. Seeking a path around the stalemate in the West, Hitler made the decision in June 1941 to open a second massive front by invading the Soviet Union. Initially, the German forces moved with familiar speed, capturing vast territories and displacing millions of people as they pushed deep into the east. But as the lines moved further from Germany, the machine began to falter. Supply chains stretched to the breaking point, and temperatures dropped well below freezing. The mechanized speed that had conquered Europe was no match for the Russian winter. At the Battle of Stalingrad, the conflict turned into a grueling war of survival. Fighting building by building through the ruins, the exhausted German forces were eventually surrounded and forced to surrender. The attempt to conquer the Soviet Union reached its limit not just through combat, but through the physical breakdown of logistics across a frozen 2,000-mile front. While the war in Europe stalled, the conflict became truly global. In December 1941, Japan launched a surprise attack on the American military base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The shock of the attack ended American neutrality overnight. The United States declared war, bringing its enormous resources and population into the global struggle. This entry changed the war's fundamental nature. Victory would no longer be decided solely by battlefield maneuvers, but by which side could sustain the highest industrial output. By 1942, the output of Allied assembly lines began to pull away from the Axis production capacity. For every aircraft or tank lost in battle, the United States and its partners could now manufacture replacements at a rate the German and Japanese economies simply could not match. This mathematical reality soon manifested on every front. The Axis powers were forced into a multi-front retreat, as they were no longer just outmaneuvered, but outproduced. From North Africa to the Pacific Islands, the momentum shifted. The Allied forces had turned their factories into engines of war, providing a constant flow of soldiers and equipment that overwhelmed the stretched Axis lines. Bravery on the front lines was now backed by a scale of industry the world had never seen, providing the necessary force to finally break the momentum of the Axis advance. On June 6, 1944, the Allies launched the largest seaborne invasion in history. thousands of ships landed on Normandy's beaches to begin liberating Western Europe. Germany was now systematically crushed between the Allied advance from the west and the Soviet push from the east, as its cities were heavily bombed and its resources finally ran dry. The end came in 1945. Berlin was surrounded, the Nazi regime collapsed, and Germany surrendered. After years of occupation, Europe began to celebrate. However, the war in the Pacific continued. To bring the conflict to a final conclusion, the United States deployed a new technology that would change